Thank you. Thanks for being here. I'm Congressman Jason Chaffetz, and it's an honor to be with you. Today is my birthday, and so I've got to say hi to my wife, Julie, and appreciate her. And I dreamt of nothing more than spending my birthday with Lindsey Graham.
Yeah.
That's just a dream come true. So
does everybody else.
Yeah, thanks. Listen, we are here in a bipartisan, bicameral way to introduce the Restoration of America's Wire Act. Back on December 23rd of 2011, the Department of Justice issued what it believed was the right interpretation of a long-standing Wire Act that had been around for more than 50 years. Those of us that are signing on to this piece of legislation simply want to restore the Wire Act to its interpretation pre-December 23rd of 2011. We're not trying to make other alterations. There are those that would argue that internet gambling should happen in a broad stroke. Some believe that internet gambling should happen just for poker. If there is a case that people want to make for online gambling, they need to come to the Congress. The Congress could or should debate this, and then perhaps that piece of legislation would ultimately pass. I personally would be against that. Being from Utah, we're one of two states that has no form of gambling. This is a very important issue to the state of Utah, to the people of Utah. Nevertheless, what we're saying with this piece of legislation, the Restoration of America's Wire Act, is that it should not be a single person in the bowels of the Department of Justice reinterpreting the law and fundamentally changing the landscape. That is not the way the process should work. These types of things should be debated and discussed in the United States Congress, and then, if appropriate, a vote would happen. But to simply have an individual in the bowels of the Department of Justice unilaterally making this change, we believe it's wrong. Now, we have heard from attorneys general from across the nation. More than 12 have written to us stating that this is a problem. We have several governors that have said that they believe that this is a challenge. You have the FBI, who has also weighed into this, believing that their money laundering and other types of unintended consequences will happen through this process. So we're trying to do that. Again, we're doing so in a bipartisan, bicameral way. We have 10 co-sponsors in the House, and one of those co-sponsors, I'd love to introduce to you, the Congresswoman from Hawaii, Tulsi Gabbard. We appreciate her work on this issue and glad that she's here today.
Thanks, Jason.
Like Jason and those of us who are supporting this bipartisan effort, this is really an effort to ensure that Congress maintains its responsibility and its role in looking at legislation and looking at policy that affects our country. And that's really what it's all about. The Internet Gambling Control Act would restore the previous interpretations of the Wire Act pre-2011 and allow for the debate to take place, should it occur, on what other changes could or should be made to the world of online gambling. Like Utah, Hawaii is also a state that does not allow any form of gambling. And making sure that we maintain states' rights to regulate gambling within their borders. Unfettered online gambling violates that right and makes it tremendously difficult for states to monitor, prevent abuse, and make sure that this loophole is not being used for criminal activity. I'm proud to be a co-sponsor of this legislation and to be working both with the House and the Senate, members from both parties, on something that just makes sense.
It is a pleasure to be here to celebrate the birthday of my friend, Congressman Jason Chaffetz, and to do so with the introduction of this legislation, to which I'm proud to attach my name, and that I'm proud to join my House and Senate colleagues who are with me on the stand today in this effort. I want to add that it's important to note it's not just the interpretation that was changed in 2011. It was the meaning of the statute itself. The Wire Act itself does, in fact, prohibit the very things we're prohibiting with this legislation. And so what we're doing, literally, is restoring the status quo ex ante, that change in interpretation. But the change in interpretation, in my opinion, was unwarranted. It was not only incompatible with the prior interpretation, that had prevailed in previous administrations. It was also incompatible with the text itself. It is appropriate that we approach this issue. Historically and under our constitutional system, the states, generally speaking, are responsible for most legislation that deals with basic sort of health, safety, and moral issues of the people, at least those that are not bound up with some enumerated power of Congress. Congress is, of course, in charge of interstate commerce, and with that, regulating the channels and the instrumentalities of interstate commerce, like the Internet. But in deference to the states, which have historically regulated these things, and in order to make sure that the states' regulatory powers are not subverted through a combination of federal legislation and changes in technology that could otherwise make this a federal issue, we're putting in place this legislation to restore the Wire Act to what it was supposed to do in the first place.
For $10, you can enter a pool to guess how old Jason is and not violate the Wire Act. This is bipartisan in the Senate, and I can promise you this: if a Republican Attorney General's office came up with this interpretation, I would be standing here. That's the point. To say that the Wire Act, after 50 years, only applied to sports betting is an incredible legal stretch. It changes fundamentally the statute, as Mike said, in Latin. I'll say in South Carolinian, it screwed everything up. It really did. It destroyed the statute. And if you want to have online gambling, then come to the Congress and see if we'll vote for it. If you want to have a poker exception, as Jason said, offer an amendment and see if it will pass. This is not just about gaming. It is really about the process. So the Attorney General's office, in my view, made a huge legal misstep here. And those of us in Congress who are worried about the effects of online gambling are going to push back. And those who feel like it's a good idea will have their say. Senator Feinstein is going to be my original co-sponsor in the Senate, and I've got a statement from her. I am pleased to join with Senator Graham to update the Wire Act to cover a broad range of online gambling, returning the statute to its pre-2011 interpretation. Many online gambling sites fail to screen for underage gamblers, do nothing to prevent money laundering, and offer no resources for fraud or other criminal acts. For most Americans, including children, gambling sites are only a few clicks away if you went down this road. And I believe Congress has a responsibility to prevent abuses from occurring. I share that position in terms of the abuse of online gambling, but let's have a debate. Senator Lee has been helped us draft the statute. Jason's been the leader in the House. Hawaii and Utah are on the same sheet of music, and we have Senator Ayotte, who's been an Attorney General, understands these issues very well, and she will be our next speaker.
Thank you. First of all, I, of course, want to wish happy birthday to Jason, and it's great to see Jason's wife here as well. Thank you for being here. So why we're here, essentially, before I got elected to the Senate, I was a state attorney general. These issues were very important to me when I served as attorney general. And this is just a situation where right before Christmas in 2011, someone in the Department of Justice, a lawyer probably within the Department of Justice, issued a ruling that reversed decades of interpretation of the Wire Act. And frankly, this interpretation defies the plain text of the Wire Act. So as everyone has said here today, I'm really appreciative of the co-sponsorship and the leadership here in the Senate and the House. This just restores what was an interpretation of the Wire Act that reversed decades of how the law had been interpreted, but most importantly, go read the plain text because it doesn't even fly with the plain text of the Wire Act. And what has been the result of this? Basically, it's been the Wild West out there on the internet, which is of deep concern, and that creates a huge problem for law enforcement. Last year in the Commerce Committee, we had a hearing on this very issue, and the president of the Fraternal Order of Police said that without the authority provided by the Wire Act, which had historically been there pre-2011 before it was undone by the stroke of a pen, without any action by Congress. Essentially, what the president of the Fraternal Order of Police said, that there's no legal or regulatory framework for law enforcement to shut down illegal activity, and millions of Americans have no recourse if they become the victims of fraud or other criminal acts that they seek to redress as a result of online gambling and the interpretation of the Wire Act. I served as Attorney General myself, and there are a lot of concerns, law enforcement concerns, that are created by this interpretation of the Wire Act. And let me just say, another piece of testimony we received before the Senate Commerce Committee, which identified Tom Grissom, the Chief Executive Officer of DAON. What he said, I think we all need to take to heart. I'm thoroughly convinced, particularly in the wake of the December 2011 Justice Department decision about the inapplicability of the Federal Wire Act to most forms of internet gambling, that continued congressional inaction on this issue is not acceptable. The risks associated with internet gambling, and in particular internet gambling that is either unregulated or insufficiently regulated, are well appreciated. These include gambling by minors, which Senator Feinstein identified in her statement, because there is no restriction right now or way to screen minors getting on these sites, because essentially we've taken the ability to regulate these sites off the table with this Wire Act interpretation. Defrauding of consumers by site operators, and there's no redress for that fraud because we don't have the authority under the Wire Act any longer. Defrauding of players by other players. Money laundering by either operators or players. Violations of jurisdictional restrictions or prohibitions. So when we talk about states' rights, states actually can't vindicate their rights under this interpretation of the Wire Act, because even if they want to regulate it, they aren't able to regulate it because this goes across state lines. And with the DOJ's interpretation of the Wire Act, they really have no authority any longer to do that in conjunction with federal authorities. And breaches of data confidentiality, security failures, and of course the problems that can happen with problem or excessive gambling. And I will tell you that I've had a personal experience with this. Someone who I know very, very well got addicted to online gambling. And so this is really an issue that we need to be concerned about, because there's no regulation out there. And because of the interpretation of the Wire Act, there's just no oversight over any of this. And it can cause a situation where people get involved in criminal activity, and frankly, concerns that organized crime and other criminal organizations can use the internet to really defraud people and to support their activities without the authority right now that was previously provided under the Wire Act. So I'm pleased to support this legislation. We just want to revert back to where we were before this really incorrect interpretation and unprecedented just change in the law by one stroke of a pen, which isn't the right way to do things. And I also wanted to mention that our legislation specifically responds to concerns that were raised by state lottery commissions, and that it includes a provision to preserve the ability of traditional retail lottery sales by brick and mortar stores. So this legislation does not impact that, and that those practices will continue. This is about really the wild, wild west on the internet and restoring the Wire Act so that there is authority to address crime that occurs with regard to internet gambling. And as my colleagues have said, this is an issue Congress needs to take up. If people in Congress want to authorize certain forms of internet gambling, then this is something that Congress should vote on, should debate, and we should ensure that if that happens, that there is proper regulatory oversight to ensure that it does not become a haven for criminals and organized crime.
Yeah, I think our votes, we got about a minute on the Senate side. We got to run and vote.
Two questions. Does your bill grandfather in the states that have already legalized it? And the second question is,
No.
3 states have,
Right.
other states are looking at it.
Nevada, New Jersey, Delaware. No.
A number of states are looking at this. Can you talk about how you plan to form a winning coalition when a lot of your colleagues are from states that are sort of looking to go in the other direction?
Well, Jason's got a good start in the House. Senator Feinstein is from California, and they're taking this issue up right now in California. Having her as a co-sponsor, I think, will help a lot. I think you will see bipartisan support for this. Senator Ayotte gave a very good explanation of what happens if you just interpret the Wire Act without any structure to it. So I really do believe at the end of the day, the consequences of this interpretation are going to be so overwhelming, people in Congress can't ignore it.
The fact that people say that this is all Sheldon Adelson and money that he's given to you and to other Republicans, and essentially you're doing his business right now.
I would say that Sheldon has aligned himself with most Baptists in South Carolina. This is an issue where there will be business interest on both sides. Sheldon will have one position, casinos in Las Vegas will have another. I think what we're trying to do is create order out of chaos, and from my point of view, this is an easy decision. South Carolina rolled back video poker gambling. There were 33,000 video poker terminals in South Carolina wreaking havoc on our state. We banned video poker. If this interpretation holds, every cell phone is a video poker terminal. I'm on solid footing in South Carolina with people I represent. And the fact that Sheldon is on board is a good thing, but I'm doing this because this is what my governor, my attorney general has suggested I do, and what I feel like I should do. If you try to pigeonhole this, that you're helping one person versus another group, you're really missing what we're trying to tell you here. We gotta go back.
I'm happy to stay and answer any additional
Thanks,
questions,
Jason.
but thank you very. Yes, sure.
Why now? Because the Wire Act
Thank you.
is several years old at this point. And we just had this first deal with that in Delaware in the
Yeah.
last few weeks. So, I mean, if Senator Graham saying it's not all Sheldon Adelson, why?
Well, we've had, I think the number is 16 attorneys general who have written to us expressing concern. You have Governor Perry who's expressed concern and sent us a letter to that effect. You have Governor Haley who's done the same. You're seeing members on a bipartisan, bicameral way everywhere from California to South Carolina to New Hampshire to Utah, saying we can't let this go by just this simple unilateral one person 2 days before Christmas making this ruling.
The Nevada-Delaware deal has something to do with the timing too.
The what?
The Nevada-Delaware cooperative announcement.
No, that certainly wasn't on my radar.
Okay, and just one other thing is, I'm wondering if, because you said it has to go through the congressional process. If someone tries to amend in a poker carve-out to this bill, would that be something that you could sit with? Or
I would vote no and fight against that. We're in a most simple form. We're just trying to go back to the world that was before the memo on December 23rd, 2011. That's what we're doing. We're just trying to restore it. If somebody wants to make a case to address and change internet gambling in any form, then they should come to Congress. We should debate that. And until it passes Congress, the law should remain the same as it was under the previous interpretations of the Wire Act. From Democratic administrations and Republican administrations, they've always interpreted it to the way we believe it is and the way it should be restored, and not just make this unilateral change from the bowels of the Department of Justice. I can't say that I've had a conversation with leadership, but we have a bipartisan, bicameral group of people out there. I have talked to Chairman Goodlatte, and I'm very optimistic. Certainly, House Republicans are very receptive to the idea that the Obama administration shouldn't just unilaterally change the interpretation of the law without coming to Congress. That's a winning argument in the House. I will stay and answer any other questions, but let me do so as we wrap this up. Go ahead, Jack.
Just real quick, what to the criticism that this will just drive more activity on the black market if you ban all online gambling?
Well, I would hope that kids and law-abiding citizens would not try to do nefarious activities on the internet. It happens. We've got to fight against it in every step of the way. But according to the Department of Justice, they want to make this legal and lawful. And you've got the FBI and law enforcement telling us this is a really, really bad idea. From a moral perspective, I believe it's a bad idea. You don't want to sanction that type of activity and have it spread, because the addiction to gambling is difficult. And if you want to gamble and you want to go to Las Vegas and that's what you choose to do, That's that person's right. But in the state of Utah, we don't allow gambling in any way, shape, or form, and neither does Hawaii. And we got to stand up for those rights. So, thank you again. Appreciate it.